Welcome to Small Arms Solutions. Today we're looking at a very interesting Colt variation. Basically what we see here is a Colt SP1. Top here is our standard SP1. And below here we have what's referred to as the Coltguard SP1. Now, there was only 1,000 of these made, and they were made in 1983. So basically it was a special run of them. Now, when you look at the finish you see on here, it's more of a satin gray on the barrel, the front sight base, and of course we had the upper lower receiver and the charging handle, and the rest of the gun remains black. You have the black stock handguards, pistol grip, as well as the lower parts kit is all black as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to go over what actually Coltguard finish is, because there's been a lot of misinformation out there of what actually it is and where it came from and who did it. So I think we're going to start off with that immediately. This came from a gunsmith out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. His name was Ed House in the late 1970s. Now, he developed a plating process called Nytex. Now, what Nytex basically was, at that time, you're making guns out of carbon steel, and the bluing and finish for like law enforcement, anybody who had guns that were exposed to elements, they would rust. The finish would come off, and it just was not a durable finish. So basically what the Nytex was, it was a finish that was this nickel type in color. At the time, it was the most durable finish that was available. Now, this is prior to the use of stainless steel. Stainless steel basically was what killed this type of a finish. So basically what it was it was an electro-nickel type of a finish. So what Mr. House would do is he would have bluing tanks, and he would have the solution for the Nytex in there. He would take in the firearms, strip them down to their basic components, put them in this tank, and then he would charge the tank electrically, and it would cause the solution to bond with the metal to a very, very durable finish. The interesting thing about this finish was when you would plate it with this, or when this would bond to the material, it would fill in scratches, any deformities in the metal. It really made the gun look very, very nice. And this process he had perfected. Now, initially he would put in all the other parts separately, but when it came to springs and things like that, it just didn't work out. So basically it was the standard metal components, not springs and pieces as such. This new process appeared first in July of 1981 in American Handgunner and got a lot of attention. So Colt took a look at it, and Colt was extremely impressed with what Mr. House was doing. So what Colt had done is they had sent numerous variations of their pistols and handguns over to Mr. House and had them finished. And Colt referred to it as Coltguard. So again, it was the Nytex finish in Mr. House's, but Colt referred to it as Coltguard. Now, you would see pythons, and you would see all kinds of revolvers and some automatic pistols that were done. Now, Colt was extremely impressed with this finish. Now, there's a lot of people who believe this was done in-house by Colt. This was not done in-house. This was sent out, and there's a lot of verifications of this. First it was verified by Colt's Walt Gleason, who was the Colt custom shop manager, who verified that, yes, in fact, we did send these guns out to Mr. House. It was also verified by Beverly Haynes, which is, Beverly is the lady in charge of Colt archives, and this has been seen on letters where Colt had sent guns to Mr. House. He would finish them, and then he would send them directly to distributors. So that was a way that it was done as well. Now, Colt had two different finishes. You had Coltguard and you had Royal Coltguard. Now, the difference was the materials. Your standard Coltguard is what you would see here on this rifle here. It was a flat color. It was more of a matte color, or you could even call it like a frosty type finish. Very, very durable, flat, very much non-reflective. So then you had Royal Coltguard. The Royal Coltguard was found on revolvers and the semi-automatic pistols. What that was, prior to the Coltguard or the Nytex being placed on the gun in the tanks, the metal was polished, very, very shiny. It was a very high shine type polish. So then when you would have the Nytex applied to it, it would be much more shiny. It would look more like a stainless steel. And that was seen as well. Now, Mr. House ended up licensing this finish to several companies. Colt was one of them, and that was the Coltguard and the Royal Coltguard. Now, this remained popular throughout the 70s and 80s, really until the stainless steel came out. And stainless steel pretty much wiped out the interest. This nickel color would come back probably, I would say, in the early 90s when Robar came out with their NP3, and it was a very, very similar finish to this. So I want to talk a little bit about this rifle. Now, the rifle you see here, I want to thank our friend Alex. Alex is a major Colt collector, and he's very gracious because he doesn't just collect it, he allows them to be viewed, and he allows us to use these for video so we can educate people on the history of Colt. So he's been responsible for many of the rare guns that I have, and I really want to thank Alex, we all should, for him allowing us to see these guns. And this was one of them. Now, this particular model you see here with the rifle, this was done on the Colt SP1 rifle. Now, it's not been really confirmed, and I've never seen one done in a carbine, but when somebody says, has Colt ever done this, I'm never going to say no. So there is possibility that there could be some Colt carbines out there. Now, this was interesting because this particular model was the first AR-15 I ever saw as a kid. When I was around 10 years old, my father took me to a gun shop in upstate New York. It was called Creekside Gun Shop. And we went in there, and this was the first time I had ever seen an AR-15. I remember the guy pulling it off of the rack. He actually pulled the bolt out of it before he handed it to me. So the Coltguard finish was the first AR-15 I ever handled. I never shot that. This rifle here is the first one I ever fired, this exact rifle. But this was the first one that I ever handled and saw as a 10-year-old kid. Now, some of the things we want to talk about specifically on this rifle are the characteristics and what is and what's not finished. Because when I was working at Colt, we had one of these rifles that came in, and it was claimed that this was a original Coltguard rifle. And when we took a look at it, we found that it was not. It was done by somebody else. And I'll tell you how I found that out. But first I want to go over the rifle. Again, this was a standard SP1 rifle. The upper and lower receiver were Coltguard finish. Now, the interesting thing was the upper and lower receiver, we're talking about aluminum parts as well as a charging handle. For the most part, the Nytex finish or the Coltguard finish was applied to steel, not aluminum. Well, it was very much like the finish that we have now. We basically call it nickel boron. UCT coating can be used on both aluminum and steel. The only thing about the aluminum is the aluminum is softer, so it can scratch easier. Where it's very difficult to scratch a Coltguard barrel or any part of the metal. The aluminum, again, with it being a little bit softer, it's more prone to scratch. So they had the upper receiver, lower receiver that were stripped, and the charging handle, which was stripped. They were all coated in Coltguard. When they were assembled with standard parts kits, which were black, as we see the ejection port cover, the rear sight, the charging handle latch, the front and rear takedown pins, the safety, even the trigger guard and the trigger were all original black. We go up to the barrel here. The barrel is completely coated in Coltguard, as well as the front sight assembly, standard handguards, standard slip ring, and of course we have our sling swivel. Now, the rifle that was sent to me, what caught my eye immediately was the fact that the entire rifle of aluminum and steel parts were all coated in this nickel finish, including the bolt catch, the bolt, the safety, all the pins. So that really caught my eye. It didn't look right when I got the rifle in. So I went back into our archive vault. At that time, we had an archive vault of one model of everything that we made in our marketing vault. I went and I pulled a rifle out, and I noticed, no, it did not have all those parts that were finished. So then we went back and looked at the serial number, and sure enough, that serial number was well post 1983 when it was made. These serial numbers are around the 202,000 range. Again, there was 1,000 of them that were made. But the only way to verify for sure if this was one of those guns is to look up the serial number and look up that range, or call Colt and have them do a search for the historical to find out. Because there are what you would call counterfeits that are out there. So you really want to beware of that. You want to check that serial number. This particular rifle was made in 1983, SP202692. This was made in 1983, which was the year that they were made. You may even find some 1984 serial numbers that had that as well. It was a very neat rifle, just due to the fact that it was different. I don't know if it was really all that popular at the time. Some people would say it was made for marine environments and whatnot. No, it wasn't. This was just, they were applying another finish that they had to their rifle. Now, there have been seen some of these rifles that were done later that were the AR-15A2 match H-bar. I have seen one of those. At least I've seen one of those. There could be more. So anytime that you would see one of these rifles, any Colt model in this finish, the only way for you to really verify what it is to contact Colt and to find out the serial number and how it left the factory. But only 1,000 of these. Now, most of the ones that we see on Gunbroker and places like that, they're pretty beat up. You'll see a lot of scratching on the receivers. You'll see some bare aluminum showing. The finish on the aluminum, I don't think, was nearly as durable. When you look at the handguns that have the Coltguard finish on them, they look beautiful. They're extremely durable because it's metal. The aluminum just tended not to take it as well as it did. Now, of course, we're not going to shoot this gun. This is part of Alex's collection that he was gracious enough to let us look at. But this is a very interesting rifle. You do see these; they're very popular on the commercial market for the collectors. And not so much for shooters, but for collectors, these are very popular. They do go for a pretty penny. You're looking from $3,000 to $5,000 for the most part, what they're worth. But they are quite rare. Again, with 1,000 being made, you see them come up once and again for sale. But this is an interesting piece of the Colt AR15 history. You'll see a lot of the revolvers, a lot of the semi-automatic pistols in this finish. Again, it was a very durable finish. At the time, it was the best finish available. It passed all saltwater tests like nothing else that was in the industry. And for a police officer who had a gun on his side and he was banging it up against things, where normally you'd scratch the hell out of a blue gun or something like that, this really offered a really durable, protective finish. And this was done by an individual, and it was done here in Texas, in Fort Worth, by Mr. House. The guns did go to him. Colt never did this finish in-house, but most companies didn't. But you will see other guns, Smith & Wessons, and you'll see other companies, because he licensed the Nytex to a lot of different companies, and they all had their own different names for it. But with Colt, it was Coltguard, and then the Royal Coltguard. So I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, please click like, please subscribe, and even better, share. Thank you.